of youth that you're part of something that would matter as much as it did? Any of you, please.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, because I had been involved with the sit-ins, and I knew what was the resulting from that this becomes another chapter, as it were. So we did sense, I believe, and I did, that there was something being done that was not just courageous in terms of outdoing it, but the fact that we were joining forces with persons who may have lived in that area, who I think were the most courageous of all, those who were residents of Mississippi. Yeah, I think we sensed that. I knew I did. But it was still caught up in the excitement of it all, that you could do something to make a difference in your life. And so I said that something was about to happen, yes.
From the county jail to Parchment, which was a maximum security prison. I could see the guards would stop the paddy wagon every few miles, and they would get out and they would drink their Coca-Colas or Royal Crowns, and they left us, of course, inside the wagons doing nothing. But it was amazing when we pulled away from one place, there were a group of blacks sitting on the porch of this really ramshackle place. They had just stood there the entire time we were stopped and looked at the paddy wagon and listened to us sing. And then, as we left, one of them waved his hands a little bit. And I knew he was afraid to do that. That was probably braver of him to do, to wave his hand before these guards from the state of Mississippi when they were right there and could have shot him. That was braver than what I had done. Because he had to live there. I knew I was always going to go back to Chicago one day. And, you know, if no one shot me that particular day, I'd be home.
I don't think I had any sense at all of the enormity of this, group event and its place in the whole civil rights movement. But I have a little different perspective on, which is that I was feeling guilty that I could, come in and leave because I was so aware of the people I was leaving behind. In fact, the day I got out of jail, we had to go to court on Monday, and the black family that took us in when we rode downtown to Western Union to get some money, I had to lie on the seat of the car because they told me that it was illegal for blacks and whites to be seen together, and I would get rearrested and they would get arrested. So, I had some sense, but we went to a church service that Sunday night before the court date on Monday. This was after the end of the jail time. And I was feeling like, how can I go back to that bus station and go into the white waiting room? I mean, it just didn't seem right to be able to get out of it and just have it be a moment in time rather. So what I learned was that there was a large middle class in Jackson, a lot of teachers and people, who had insurance companies, and Jackson had lagged behind other large southern white cities in their civil rights activities. And this elderly man, he was in his 80s, he said to me, the fact that you kids came down here and went to jail is really making a difference for us because I think you've gotten us started. And in fact, that did happen. So that was a real gift to not just feel that you were sort of a privileged person who could come and go, but that you had actually had some impact on the community.
When I work for LEAP, it's a nonprofit, and I work with children all the time. young children ages 7 to 12, as well as an LIT leader in training that ranges from ages 13 to 15. And I just wanted to know, how do you feel about the children of today? Being that you come from such a hard trail of discrimination and segregation, everything that the civil rights movement stood for, going through that, how do you feel about the children of today? Do you feel like we have come a long way and still have long to go, or do you feel like there's always room for improvement, but not as much?
And you can't think of civil rights or any other movement as succeeding, because there's always something more that can be done for you and for some other group. So I don't think kids today are living in an easy world. I think their world is very different. And I think it's very difficult. But they have to, what we need to make sure they understand is that there is something that can be done. If not by an individual, by groups of individuals, block by block, that things are not hopeless. I mean, I never would have gone on the freedom rides if I had to go all by myself. I mean, I wouldn't have gotten off that bus if the other 8 freedom riders that day had said, well, Lula, we're not going with you. We're going to stay on the bus. You think I would have stepped out there? Of course not.
See happening, even at this point in time, gives me a great deal of optimism and excitement about the fact that I've always believed that despite what media reports and images portray, that the mass of our young people, black and white, rich and poor, no matter what orientation they are doing grand things in terms of wanting to make a difference. If nothing has showed us that there are in this youthful generation a group out there who is trying to make a difference, then this electoral process has shown us something unique and rare in recent American history. And for that, I'm excited. And my challenge to you is to keep doing what you're doing. Keep sharing.
Action, and as you think about it for us now and how it's affected you since, and I'm thinking about Dr. King talking about we have a choice, nonviolence and non-existence. And it's a country that is so steeped in violence. I wonder what it was like for you to be trained in it, to be engaged in that action, and your thoughts about it for us now.
And I fought in the play yard with children when I was in elementary school. But I didn't see violence as the solution for everything. And I think that that's the only tactic that would have worked in the early 60s, was for groups of people who were willing to endure verbal abuse and physical assault and not strike back. I think that was the right tactic. And but I think for future generations there may be other strategies, other ways of organizing that they have to discover for themselves. But in general, I favor nonviolence. I don't think violence works ever.
The nature of life as a nation. But when you generally look at us as a nation, particularly in recent years, we've been viewed as a rather violent nation in terms of our approach to things, our involvement in the war, and others. That though by nature there is that humanness in us that says we respond, we knock back. It takes a great deal of will, stamina, and discipline to be able to live the life of nonviolence and not be viewed in that nonviolence living tactic as weakness. Gandhi shows us that. Martin showed us that. And many of the others, whose names we may never call, showed us that. So though that's evident, I still think we have to approach life, move ahead, understanding that you can't win by just violent reaction that it's going to take that to win.
Great to be with you. My question has to do with the community. Ms. Lulu made a small sort of example of being in the paddy wagon with the group and singing together. And I'm wondering if any of you would be willing to reflect on your sense of the power of community to get an individual to take an action of the type that you took, and the repercussions it has for someone outside that community, like that man that you mentioned who dared to stand up to an authority because of the power of the community that you had created inside that paddy wagon. So I'm just wondering your reflections of the role of community and the power that it has to get people to act, not only collectively, but as individuals.
And what is evident is that it took a community to work. The civil rights movement could not have had the success or the gains it had it not been for that diverse community. Jewish, Protestant, Catholic, you name it, young, old, rich, black, white. It is that kind of entrenchment where a community really comes together when it finds a unique cause that it can believe in. And I think that's what happened in the civil rights. And so we get the Voter Rights Act, we get the Civil Rights Act, we get all that follows. The fact now, the challenge now is how do we live up to those sacrifices and struggles that were made in order that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, but not learning from the past itself. So communities have been very important. Now, of course, my whole life has been based on the understanding of community, believe in the potential of every individual to be what the Creator created them to be. So the community has been very important. One example is when we were on the paddy wagon being transferred to Parchment in my group, when they stopped, the guard got out of the truck and he had like a double-barreled shotgun. I guess that's what he was doing. And looked up through the window and said, "I ought to shoot your so-and-so brains out." And all of a sudden the response came, "But we still love you, brother." It was almost like a spontaneous kind of reaction. But that's where I am with that.
Thank you for the question.
I don't think, I think you always have to have community with you, whether it's outside or inside, when you do something like that. I love what you said about if you had been the only one to get off the bus, you wouldn't have gotten off. And I think about, I didn't know anybody that I went to Mississippi with. They were a group of strangers to me. And yet, and I happen to be a group therapist, so I'm very aware of the power. And I'm thinking, maybe that's why I became a group therapist. It's like, I think that the young men that I met who came up from the South, who really, led me in a sense, they were my community, even though in a sense, they were the community that bridged my being an observer and becoming a participant. I mean, and I'm also thinking, just in psychological terms, there are 5 possible responses: fight, flight, freeze, submit, or attach. And meaning that when you're frightened, if you can attach, like a baby to the mother or a monkey to the, you find safety in proximity. And I think that, it's just another dimension of thinking that you have to have community, even if you don't know that community. I remember driving in the van from Jackson to Parchment, and our driver kept jamming on the brakes so we'd all fall over, and then he was throwing lit cigarettes back at us. And if I had been alone, I don't know what I would have done. It was just, even though I didn't really know these people, that sense that there were others with me committed to the same the same goal is just absolutely essential.
Can I get in on this? Because I wasn't a freedom rider.
Singing in the community, in the moment, and in the paddy wagons and the jail cells. One of the things that I don't think I got in my book enough was this sense of how singing kept them all together. On the bus, and in the jail cells, in the paddy wagons. And it's hard to capture that, I think, in written form. And but I tried to put as many quotes in there about it. And Rip Patton was a freedom rider from Nashville, Tennessee. And when they got to Parchment, I think somebody said already, Reverend Green, they took their mattresses away from the freedom riders in one book because they kept singing. They sang in the city jail, they sang in Parchment. He says, I think it was around the 4th of July, they turned off the water and the air conditioning. And Rip Patton said they turned off the AC and the water because we wouldn't stop singing as the 4th of July. So it was hot and a little smelly because we couldn't flush the toilets. But we kept singing. That singing, they just couldn't handle it. And I think it was just what I get from it was a very effective means to hold on to each other. In the city jail, as Lulu said, the men and the women were separated from each other, and the whites from the blacks, and they were often sort of in different places in the city and the county jail. But they would sing to each other at night, and prisoners who were not freedom riders would sometimes join in and sing as well. And that kind of just blows me away. But let me give it back to Reverend Green now, because he's the singer here.
Yeah. Now, heritage, and many of you may not know, but for us, it's a lot of an African tradition. Music is the lifeblood for us as a community. And what the Freedom Songs were, in fact, just taking the language of the Negro spirituals, transferring that language into the spirit of that movement. And so we sing, oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. That's just a sample of what went on. See what happens. Every now and then I go back to my junior high school days when we had a little doo-wop singing group in junior high school. And I share this quickly with you. And the first tenor in my little group, because that's how African American kids entertain themselves in Southwest Washington, was a fellow named Marvin Gaye. Marvin was the first tenor. And so I would remind him from time to time, he needs to thank me for his career.
Use the names of our captors and our arresters in our songs. So there were songs about Sergeant Tyson, who was the jailer, who brought us our food each day. There were songs about Ross Barnett, who was the governor of Mississippi. There were songs about Captain Ray, who seemed to have arrested all the freedom riders. So, the songs, getting unfamiliar with our tradition knows that you can just add your own words to a song. Once you get the tune straight, you just make up your own words that will fit.
Well, Ellen referred to, certainly our African tradition is about the code, but was there a lot of that as well, not only with the singing, not only with the songs, but actually in the conversations? Did you find yourself speaking in code to sort of make sure that
Well,
they didn't know what was being talked about?
The people who wrote to me while I was in jail often used code because they knew that the censors who read every single letter that came in might block the letters if they just came out and said what they wanted to say. So they often did use code.
The code was primarily used for Allen and others did, which was set up a system before they got arrested.
I was remembering that every morning when we woke up and the prisoners, Lou, turns out, and I were in there together. And we sang "Oh What a Beautiful Morning" every day. And it really set, I know that it filled my heart, and it made a huge difference. And then also, we were singing and the guard told us to stop, and I think there was something about the cohesiveness and the power of the group that they couldn't tolerate. And we would be obedient when, the rule, when it made sense to, but not this kind of, you have to stop singing now. And I remember that the air conditioning was on 24, we were on death row. It wasn't just maximum security, but we were on death row. The electric chair was at the end of our cell block. And
Two cells from me.
right, when he told us to stop singing and we didn't, they took our mattresses away, which meant we were sleeping on metal, freezing metal, because of the air conditioning. And we didn't have much to take away. I guess that was, we didn't have shoes or books or anything like that. But our spirits rose. I mean, it was sort of like, you can't make a slave of me, We'll go to our freezing beds and be happy in them because we're together, we're doing the right thing. I mean, so the music had so many implications and uses.
Also, nonviolence is more than just not striking someone down. It's also courtesy and speaking to people. We were always, we didn't bow down before the jailer or the matron or the trustee, but we always were polite, but insistent that certain things be done. So that's part of violence and nonviolence too, the way you speak to people.
It's my job as moderator. If it's actually warming up and happening, we also have to give all of you the opportunity to purchase books and then to get them signed. Get them signed, and to join me one more time in thanking all of these remarkable individuals for the work that they've done on our behalf.
For being here. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Jonathan. And I don't think they're going anywhere, right?
Let's go over here and sign books.
I just wanted to publicly thank Eric for revitalizing in us a spirit of understanding of those journeys we made in our life, and I owe that to you today. And thank you for letting me participate.